The worst part wasn't the man standing next to her. It wasn't his hand on the small of her back, or the way she leaned into it like gravity suddenly worked sideways. It wasn't even the drink in her hand, the same brand of spiced rum I used to buy for our game nights, the one she claimed she hated because it smelled like broken promises. No. The worst part was the laughter. Not hers. Everyone else's. You know that kind of laugh people do when someone drops a joke that's just barely inappropriate but said with enough charm to let it slide? That was the room. That was the sound that swallowed me. And her joke? 14 words. 14. I counted them. Right before I turned around and left. Don't worry about him, she said, loud enough to be heard past the music. That's just my husband. He's basically furniture. The guy beside her, wearing the same cologne I got her for our anniversary, laughed first. Then her boss. Then the interns. One even clapped. And she didn't even flinch. Didn't look at me. Didn't even blink. I'd been standing near the catering table for 8 minutes. 8 long minutes. Holding a soda I didn't want. Smiling at people I didn't know. Waiting for her to introduce me. But I wasn't in her world anymore. I was beside it. Just close enough to hear her pretend I didn't exist. So I did what furniture does. I stood still. Then I walked away. But that's not even the betrayal. Not yet. That came later, when I found out what was really behind that joke. When the emails started syncing to the old iPad I forgot was still logged in. When I read what she sent at 2:13 a.m. after the party ended. You want to know what it said? I'll tell you in part 2. Because if I read it again right now, I might break the screen. Still breathing. When I walked out of that office party, I didn't slam the door. I didn't cause a scene. No one noticed. That's what stung the most. I could have burst into flames and not a single soul would have dropped their glass. I got into my car, turned the key halfway, then just sat there. For an hour. Maybe 2. The radio was off. The world outside the windshield was blurry, not from rain, the weather was perfect, but from my eyes that refused to settle on one truth. I was no longer part of her life. I was a leftover, and everyone inside that building had already eaten. I didn't go home. I drove around the block like a man with nowhere to land. Somewhere between streetlights and shame, I ended up in an all-night laundromat parking lot, staring at spinning machines through dirty windows, asking myself how it got to this. That's when my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, but it buzzed again, and then silence. I unlocked it, almost out of reflex. Nothing from Kendra. Not a "where are you?" Not a "what happened?" Not even a "why did you leave?" Instead, it was a sync alert. The old iPad. The one she used to use for recipes and Pinterest and barely remembered she left logged into her Gmail. It had been buried in the kitchen drawer for months. I'd meant to factory reset it, but like most things in our marriage, I put it off too long. And there it was. Sent. 2:13 a.m. Subject. The red dress. My stomach twisted. I tapped the preview. It opened slowly, like the universe wanted to drag the blade before stabbing me with it. Still thinking about tonight. Your hand on my back. The way you made me laugh. It felt like I finally came alive again. He was there, of course. I almost forgot. But I don't think he noticed. He never really does. You were right. I do deserve more. Maybe next time, we don't just hint at it. Maybe next time, we don't stop. I swear my fingers went numb. I dropped the phone. Picked it back up. Read it again. He never really does. That was me. I never noticed, she said. I never saw her. I was blind. I was furniture. I'd been walking around the house for months, beating myself up for forgetting to fix the door hinge, or failing to ask about her new coworker whose name she always skipped. I thought I was the one falling short. And here she was, laughing with someone else, writing to him in the early morning hours like a teenager with a crush, except this time, it wasn't innocent. The email wasn't long, but it was enough. Enough to shatter what little doubt I had left. I clicked on the thread. The whole exchange was right there. Weeks of it. Flirty lines, accidental compliments, complaints about me buried inside jokes that I wasn't part of. He signed his name at the bottom of every message, Troy. The same guy from the party. The one with the smug smile and the too familiar hand. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march back to that rooftop and drag her out by her guilt. But instead, I just sat there in the dark parking lot of a place that smelled like soap and sadness, wondering when exactly I became forgettable. She told him I didn't notice. But I did. Not at first. Not all at once. But piece by piece. The late nights. The cold kisses. The way she stopped correcting people when they mispronounced my name. as if who I was didn't matter anymore. I thought about going home, but I couldn't face our bed. Not after reading that. Not after seeing her confess to feeling alive in someone else's hands. So I went to the one place I knew she wouldn't check, the guest room in our garage-converted workspace. I pulled out the old camping mattress, locked the door, and lay there with the email burned into my skull like it was tattooed on the inside of my eyelids. Tomorrow, I'd confront her. Or maybe the day after. I didn't know. I wasn't ready. But I knew one thing. I would never see that red dress the same again. And she had no idea I'd read it all. Yet, the morning after that email, the world felt suspiciously ordinary. Too bright. Too quiet. Too normal. The kind of normal that made you feel insane just for remembering what happened the night before. Sunlight streamed through the dusty blinds of the garage guest room, illuminating the uneven ceiling and a dead spider web in the corner. I hadn't moved much in the last few hours. I hadn't really slept, either, more like floated in and out of dreams that looked too much like memories I didn't want anymore. I kept hearing her voice in my head. Not from the email. From the party. That's just my husband. He's basically furniture. The words kept looping with every passing car outside. Every time the pipes groaned. Every time my phone buzzed. But this time, it was her. Text message. Just one. You didn't come home? That was it. No concern. No guilt. Just a flatline question as if she couldn't be bothered to look up from her toast. I didn't reply. I sat there for another 10 minutes staring at the screen, wondering if she'd follow up. She didn't. Instead, I heard music through the walls. Low. Familiar. Our Sunday playlist. She was home. I left the garage slowly, trying to compose my face like I hadn't just read 24 emails detailing the slow collapse of my marriage. The house smelled like vanilla. And butter. And cinnamon. She was making pancakes. Pancakes. With bananas sliced into smiley faces, the way she used to when we first got married and had $13 to our names. Hey stranger, she said, flipping one with ease. Thought maybe you stayed with Nate or something. I didn't answer. Just watched her hands. Confident. Calm. Like they hadn't typed out, I forgot he was even there. At 2:13 a.m. She turned to look at me. What? Still nothing. I walked over to the counter, opened the fridge, pretended to be thirsty. Inside sat 2 bottles of the same champagne they had at the party. Unopened. I closed the door. Slowly. You're being weird, she finally said. I looked at her, not at her face, but at her arms. Her neck. Her body. I was trying to figure out which part of her remembered him. Which part still felt like mine. You have fun at the party? I asked. That got a pause. Yeah. I mean, it was loud. And long. You didn't miss much. I wanted to ask if Troy walked her to the elevator. I wanted to ask if his hands lingered. If they kissed. If the cab smelled like guilt. Instead, I said, you made a joke. At my expense. She blinked. What are you talking about? I tilted my head. Gave her a look like don't play dumb. I could see the color start to drain from her cheeks. Just a little. It was just a joke. Emery, she said, quieter now. People laugh at those things. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it. Like I was furniture. She turned off the stove. Pancakes burned slightly on one side. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. You're so sensitive lately. I don't even know what's going on with you. Seriously. No apology. No remorse. Just deflection, like always. She was steering the conversation into a ditch, so I'd have to defend my emotions instead of questioning her behavior. That's when I realized something brutal. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't scared. She didn't think she was doing anything wrong, because she had convinced herself I'd never leave. I nodded once. Calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before an emotional landslide. You're right, I whispered. Maybe I'm just being dramatic. Her shoulders relaxed. She smiled, like she'd won something. And that's when I knew I couldn't let her see what I knew. Not yet. I needed time. I needed to watch her. I needed her to feel safe before I made her understand how it feels to be replaced. I took a bite of the pancake she made me. It tasted like lies. And as she turned back to the stove to pretend everything was fine, I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed 4 words. She has no idea. I started documenting everything that same day. Not because I planned on using it against her, but because I needed something to hold onto, something solid. When you feel yourself unraveling, you look for anchors. Mine came in the form of a digital note titled simply, If She Ever Asks. I filled it with times, quotes, looks, hesitations. I wasn't collecting evidence. I was gathering truth. My truth. Because living with her meant second-guessing my own reality every day, and I was done playing detective with my own sanity. She went to the gym that evening. I heard her toss on her leggings, complain about her missing sports bra, and blame me for not folding the laundry correctly. Then she left with her duffel bag and her car keys like nothing was crumbling behind her. I waited 5 minutes, maybe 6. Then I walked into our bedroom, a room I suddenly realized was more hers than ours. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe proof she deleted the emails. Maybe a phone number scribbled on a napkin like in bad movies. What I found instead was something smaller. Something far worse. Her work laptop was plugged in. She had forgotten it in the rush, and it had fallen asleep without locking. I nudged the trackpad. It blinked awake. Now, let me say this. I wasn't proud of what I did. But at the same time, I don't think I was wrong. Marriage used to be built on shared passwords and late-night secrets whispered into darkness. Ours had turned into parallel lives sharing a toothbrush holder. I opened her recent files. Most were normal, reports, invoices, a presentation about growth targets. But one folder stood out. It was named Vendor Review, boring enough to ignore. So, of course, I clicked it. Inside were 2 Word documents, both password protected. My heart rate ticked up. I recognized the name of the first file. It was a quarterly meeting she'd mentioned. But the second one was titled Midnight_Thoughts.docs. No company labels. No timestamps. Just that name. I copied it to a flash drive and backed out. I didn't open it. Not yet. Something told me I shouldn't. Not when I was already shaking from the idea that it existed in the first place. I had a bad habit of finding things I wasn't ready to deal with. And I needed to time this right. So instead, I went to the kitchen, poured myself some juice I didn't want, and sat at the table with my head resting on my arms until I heard her return. She called from the entryway, breathless and upbeat. Guess who finally beat her mile time? I didn't answer. She walked into the room, hair damp, cheeks glowing. I could see she had no idea. Not a clue. She kissed my temple, habitually, like pressing a doorbell. She didn't expect anyone to answer, and went straight to the fridge. I might book a day at the spa next weekend, she said casually. Troy said it helps him reset after quarterly chaos. He gave me a contact. There it was. His name. She dropped it like it meant nothing. Like I hadn't memorized the font he used in his email signature. I waited for her to look at me. She didn't. Instead, she pulled out leftover pasta and started humming. And I don't know what it was, maybe the pitch, maybe the casual joy in her voice, but I stood up and walked past her without a word. She paused. You okay? Headache, I said. Oh, you should take something. I went back to the garage and locked the door. Sat down. Plugged in the flash drive. Opened the file. The password prompt blinked at me like a dare. I tried her cat's name. Her high school mascot. Our wedding date. Nothing worked. I was about to give up when I remembered the charger on her nightstand, the one she called her lifeline. She never left home without it. Except today. So I walked back inside, quietly, past the humming, the clinking cutlery, the woman I used to know. I picked up the charger. Attached was a sticky note folded in half. One word written on it. Troy. No punctuation. No context. Just his name. Like a label. Like ownership. I stared at it for 10 full seconds, then went back and typed it into the document. The file opened. And the first line read, If I ever tell him, it won't be because I'm sorry. It'll be because I'm bored. My ears started ringing. That sound? That wasn't heartbreak. That was clarity, the kind that makes you dangerous. I closed the file. Not another word. I didn't need to read more. I already knew too much. The rest wasn't for me. It was for her. And someday soon, she was going to hear it out loud. In my voice. In a room she thought was safe. I didn't sleep that night. Again. But it wasn't from pain. Not anymore. Something else had taken over, something colder. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't plotting chaos. I was simply preparing the truth. The raw kind. The kind you say only once, in the right tone, in the right room, with no interruptions, and it scorches the air like fire through dry grass. I wanted her to feel what I felt. Not in volume, but in silence. The next morning, I told her we should host dinner. A dinner, she said, puzzled. With who? Your work people, I replied, casually spooning oatmeal into a bowl. Just a few. Keep it small. Intimate. Like old times. Her eyes squinted slightly. She was suspicious. Not enough to decline, but just enough to hesitate. And that hesitation? That was everything. Because it told me she already knew she had something to hide. Guilt isn't always loud. Sometimes, it lingers in the delay before a yes. Sure, she finally said, brushing imaginary dust off her sleeve. Yeah, that could be fun. She used the word fun too easily. So I let her organize it. Let her pick the wine. Let her text the invites. I even saw the message she sent to Troy. Dinner at ours this Friday. Emery's idea. He's trying, I think. I'll be charming. You just be chill. I screenshotted it. Added it to my growing file of quiet detonations. Friday came quickly. I made sure the house was perfect. Not in the usual way. Not just clean staged. Photos of us at the beach. Fridge notes signed with hearts. Candles she hadn't touched in months. Every room whispered happy couple like a lie rehearsed too often. And then the doorbell rang. He was first. Troy. He looked exactly how I expected him to. Just plain enough to hide behind. Just handsome enough to be dangerous. Kendra greeted him like a neighbor, a brief hug. Nothing obvious. But her smile lingered. And he noticed me watching it. Emery, he said, offering a hand. Good to finally meet you. I shook it. His grip was firm. Performed, almost. The kind of handshake that wanted you to know he practices being impressive. Glad you could make it, I said. We don't do this often. I wanted to see who Kendra laughs with so much at work. He blinked, just a flicker. But it was there. A short circuit. He wasn't expecting that line. Neither was she. I turned and called out into the kitchen. Kendra, could you grab the new Pinot? The one you had behind the oat milk. She flushed slightly. Oh, yeah, of course. And while she stepped away, I led Troy to the living room, handed him a glass of water, and pointed to the small wooden box on the table. What's that? He asked. A game, I said. We'll get to it. Soon the other guests arrived. 2 women from finance. 1 man from tech. All polite. All loud enough to create the cover I needed. Dinner was smooth. Conversation floated harmlessly from promotion gossip to movie sequels. But beneath the surface, every fork scrape was tension. Every clink of glass was a warning bell. Dessert came, and I brought out the box. All right, I said. We're doing something different tonight. Each person pulls a card. 1 question. Everyone answers. Nervous laughter. A few raised eyebrows. I smiled like a man hosting a game night, not an execution. The first questions were harmless. What's your worst date story? What song would play during your life's montage? Have you ever cried at a commercial? Then I passed the box to Kendra. She pulled her card, and I watched her face shift. Her lips parted slightly. She didn't read it aloud. So I leaned in and said, Go ahead. It's just a game. She cleared her throat. What's the one thing you've never told your partner, but probably should have? The room got quiet. Too quiet. The finance girl giggled nervously and said something about not liking her boyfriend's cologne. The tech guy followed with a story about breaking a mug on purpose. Everyone kept it light. Then it came to Kendra. She looked at me, then at her wine, then at the card, then back to me, and blinked. Just a second too long. A blink that was less about thinking and more about hiding. I don't know, she said finally, laughing in that high pitch she uses when she's bluffing. Maybe that I've never actually liked jazz music. Emery plays it constantly. I fake it. More laughter. Some relief. The room moved on. But I didn't. Because I knew what her real answer was. It was in that pause. That nervous sip. That retreat into a joke. So I waited until the last guest left. Waited until the dishes were done. Waited until she changed into that oversized sleep shirt with the faded cartoon she's had since college. And I asked her 1 question. Only one. When were you going to tell me about the document called Midnight_Thoughts? The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. She opened her mouth. Closed it. And for the first time in our marriage. She had nothing to say. She didn't answer me right away. She just stared at me, the way you'd stare at a sound you weren't sure you actually heard. Her hands stayed frozen around her tea mug, chamomile, always chamomile, and her knuckles had turned white. Behind her, the kitchen light flickered. Probably a dying bulb. Fitting. Kendra, I said again, when were you going to tell me about the Midnight_Thoughts file? She didn't blink this time. She lowered the cup and placed it down on the table with too much care, like she was scared it might explode. How did you even? I didn't answer that. Let her wonder. Let her imagine all the ways I might have found it. I needed her off balance. I needed her to feel, for once, like I had a secret too. She pulled her sleeves over her hands and looked down. That file wasn't meant to be opened, she whispered. I know, I said. That's why you protected it with his name. Her head snapped up. That told me everything I hadn't read in the document. Troy wasn't just a fling. He wasn't just an inappropriate joke told between wine glasses at an office party. He was something else. Something carved into her, like regret she hadn't gotten around to confessing yet. She didn't deny it. She didn't lie. And somehow, that was worse than anything she could have said. I wasn't going to tell you, she said finally, her voice thin. Not because I wanted to protect you, but because I didn't know how to say it without breaking something I knew I couldn't fix. I didn't move. Not even to nod. I wanted her to keep talking. People reveal the most when they're trying to minimize the damage. It started during the last product cycle, she continued. Long nights. Lots of pressure. He made me feel noticed. I wasn't even looking for anything. But there were little things, compliments, shared frustrations, dumb inside jokes. I remember the emails. The way they joked about me without naming me. Like I was a concept, not a person. The jokes always circled back to how quiet I was, how simple, how forgettable. I thought I could keep it in the just talking phase, she said, voice cracking now. I really believed I wouldn't let it go further. But it did, I said. Not a question. She nodded slowly. Yeah, a few times. It wasn't love. It wasn't even lust. It was permission. I wanted to feel like someone wanted me enough to break something for it. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and I saw her for the first time as someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could smile across a dinner table and hand me mashed potatoes, knowing she'd let someone else unzip her dress just days earlier. Did you love him? I asked. She hesitated. No, she said. But I loved who I got to be around him. That answer cut deeper than if she'd said yes. I stood up. Quietly. My knees cracked, betraying the exhaustion I carried. I didn't say anything. I just walked to the hallway, opened the coat closet, and pulled out the overnight bag I'd packed 2 days earlier. She hadn't noticed. Of course she hadn't. When I walked back into the kitchen, her face changed. No. Emery, please, don't do this like a movie. Please don't walk out without letting me explain the rest. I paused. Not because I was considering it, but because part of me wanted to hear just how far she was willing to go to convince me to stay broken beside her. I don't need the rest, I said. You already explained everything when you made the joke. She shook her head. That wasn't about you. I was trying to be funny. It was just a stupid moment. No. It was the only honest thing you said that night. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. I slung the bag over my shoulder and looked at her one last time. You'll have to find someone else to laugh at now. And I walked out. The air outside was cold. Real. Untouched by her perfume or her lies. But I didn't feel free. Not yet. Freedom, I knew, would only come once I figured out who I was without her shadow hanging over me. And that part was still ahead. It took me exactly 11 days to breathe normally again. Not in the poetic sense. I mean physiologically. 11 mornings waking up without the sound of her voice in the background, without the smell of her expensive moisturizer lingering in the hallway. 11 nights of not listening for the door or her footsteps. Just silence. Clean, unfiltered, punishing silence. It didn't heal me, but it gave me space to figure out what the pain was hiding. I stayed in a rental studio 20 minutes outside the city, above a pawn shop that smelled like cigarettes and bad decisions. It had exactly 3 working lights, 1 window with no screen, and a mattress that probably came with diseases. But it was mine. Mine in the way nothing had been for a long time. I started writing again. Not professionally, I was never that good, but in the margins of books and on napkins. Just thoughts. Short sentences. Sometimes just words. One morning, I wrote, "Grief is what love becomes when it dies slowly." I didn't even remember writing it. I just found it on the bathroom mirror, scribbled in steam with my fingertip. I wasn't checking on her. I deleted her social media. Blocked her number. Blocked Troy's, too. I even blocked his company's entire domain on Gmail just in case. I was done giving her a back door into my mind. I thought that would be enough. But grief doesn't need a phone to speak. Sometimes it arrives on paper. On the 12th day, around noon, I got a knock at the door. A courier. Clean shirt, no eye contact, clipboard in hand. "Are you Emery Breyer?" I hesitated, then nodded. He handed me a white envelope, unbranded, no return address, sealed with a waxy red stamp. It looked like something from a period drama, and it scared me more than any phone call ever could. I didn't open it immediately. I waited until the courier drove off. I closed the door, sat down at the tiny counter that doubled as a table. The envelope was heavy. Not a letter, Something more. Inside, there were two things. First, a folded photograph. Grainy. Low-res. Taken from a distance. But unmistakable. It was me. Me, sitting alone in that dingy laundromat parking lot the night of her office party. Same hoodie. Same car. Same slouch posture. The timestamp read 2:11 a.m. The second item was a note. Not handwritten. Typed. Printed neatly on cream-colored paper. A single paragraph. No greeting. No signature. You think you know what happened. You don't. I didn't send this to hurt you. I sent it because there are still pieces of this you haven't found. And I don't want you walking away with the wrong ending. Look at the photo. Really look. It's not just about you sitting there. It's about who was watching and who was with them. My stomach turned. I flipped the photo back over. Looked closer. At first, all I saw was myself. But then, in the top left corner, through the reflection on the laundromat window, a second shape. A silhouette. Not mine. Too small to be mine. Hair up in a messy bun. Hand lifted to a phone. My pulse spiked. I dug out my old portable magnifier from my bag, one I used to use to inspect old coins, years ago. Held it over the window reflection. It was her. Kendra. Standing next to someone. I couldn't make out the second figure clearly, but they were facing her. Close. Intimate. She wasn't home that night like she told me. She wasn't asleep. She wasn't crying or feeling guilty. She was watching me. And someone was watching her. Suddenly, the note felt less like a message and more like a warning. I reread the final line again. Who was watching and who was with them? There was more to this. Not just betrayal. Not just infidelity. Someone else knew what she was doing. Maybe even helped her hide it. My first thought was Troy. But something didn't fit. He wasn't careful. He was loud, cocky, reckless. Whoever sent this, they were methodical. Which meant someone in her circle. Someone I hadn't seen coming. I reached for my phone. Unblocked her number. Not to call, but to trace one very specific message she had once deleted right in front of me. A name I thought was a client. Someone she'd been texting at odd hours. Someone who never replied in words. Just emojis. The contact name? Grayline Consulting. I checked the number. Area code wasn't local, but the last 4 digits matched the one used to activate her tablet when she lost it last year. And just like that, I realized something terrifying. Kendra wasn't just cheating. She was planning something. And if I didn't find out what before the next envelope arrived, I might not like the role I played in her version of the ending. I didn't sleep the night after the envelope arrived. Not a second. I sat at the edge of the bed with the photo in one hand and the note in the other, replaying every version of events I'd accepted as truth. Every shrug. Every deflection. Every, "you're being sensitive," when my gut told me something was wrong. She had fed me silence like it was kindness. And I swallowed it, again and again, thinking it was love. By morning, I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was awake. And for the first time in weeks, I knew what I needed to do. I drove back into the city, back to the house that still technically had my name on the deed. I didn't call ahead. I didn't knock. I used my key one last time and walked into what felt like a museum. Every photo, every pillow, every damn scented candle frozen in a moment that no longer existed. Kendra was in the kitchen, startled but composed, as if she'd been rehearsing for this. "I figured you'd come eventually," she said. I said nothing. Just placed the envelope on the table. Her eyes widened slightly. "Where did you get this?" "I didn't come here for more lies," I said. "I came for the truth. All of it. Clean. Final. And then I walk out. For good." She didn't argue. Maybe she was tired. Or maybe she knew there was nothing left to protect. Yes, she admitted. There was more. Not more men. Just more planning. I was ready to leave. I was setting things up. New apartment. New job out of state. Grayline isn't a consulting firm. It's a relocation contact. Discreet. Legal. Confidential. "So you were going to vanish?" I asked. "Without telling me?" "I didn't want to fight," she said. "I didn't want to hurt you more than I already had." That part made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so typical of her. Avoid the fallout. Clean break. No mess. Like I was a leash she wanted out of. She reached for my hand. I didn't let her take it. "Don't," I said gently. She froze. "I'm not here to make you feel better about what happened. I'm here to say goodbye, like a person, not an afterthought." Her eyes filled, but I stood firm. "I forgive you," I said, and her face broke. "Not because you deserve it, but because I do." She opened her mouth to speak, but I turned and walked away before she could say a word. Outside, the air felt different, sharper, real. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I went to a small diner on 14th and Main, ordered pancakes, brought my journal. For the first time in years, I sat across from no one and didn't feel alone. I felt whole, like I had finally stopped waiting to be chosen by someone who never saw me in the first place. 3 months later, I moved out of the city, not to run, to restart. I found a new apartment with creaky stairs and terrible plumbing, but sunlight in every room. I started writing full-time quietly under a pseudonym. I joined a local writing group, volunteered at the library on weekends. I even got a dog. Her name's Marbles. She hates everyone but me. I haven't spoken to Kendra since, but sometimes I think about her, not with bitterness, with distance. Like an old movie I once starred in before I realized I was better off behind the camera. Because that's what healing is. Not pretending it didn't happen, but knowing it no longer defines you. And me? I'm not the furniture anymore. I'm the guy who got up and walked out of the room and built something better.